or with
Sanasa Kava. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist.
So today, Sanasa and I get to take you through a very short journey of introducing you to strengthening communities. I want to start off by saying this information session is intended for two different populations. You may be a possible coalition or network interested in participating, or you may be a community and faith leader and you want to learn more about what's going on, and you're going to encourage other people that you know to participate in this program. We are going to be recording. We are recording. We will be choosing the best of our two recordings and we'll send it out next week. We also have an open application. Some of you may have received it. Some of you have been sent here via Jill Cornell, and she did some outreach with you all. She is on vacation, but we sent a big greeting and hello on behalf of Jill. Some of you got this information from the newsletter. Some of you are CERT leaders and you've joined. You have a role in the space for this as well. And then some of you might have just stumbled upon it and said this seems interesting. So to each of you, we welcome you and thank you for joining. And we're going to jump in. Again, please keep yourself muted through the duration of this presentation. We'll have plenty of time at the end to answer questions. Sanasa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariah. So New York City Emergency Management helps New Yorkers before, during, and after emergencies. We have over 240 diverse professionals. They have different expertise in planning, emergency response, public health, and I can go on and on. So planning and preparedness basically means we develop contingency plans and protocols that guide the city's response to natural and man-made disasters. Either this is hurricane, extreme weathers like extreme heat, or coastal storms. And it focuses specifically on preparedness, different trainings, webinars that the community engagement department does. And the plans seek to minimize the effect of hazards on New York City and following a disaster to return the residents to their daily routines as quickly as possible. And that takes us to response. Response means responding to a disaster. Disaster has happened. We have our CERT team and our employees, some of the employees that respond to different disasters. And also that takes us to recovery, right? Preparing depends on, recovering depends on how prepared a community is, right? We educate the public about different preparedness. If you have heard of the Ready New York, making a plan, being informed, and gathering your supplies, and also disseminate information. We constantly collect and disseminate emergency preparedness information to our partners and the public in general. So this goes throughout the Notify NYC app, which is the city's official source of emergency information. And and in the community engagement team, which we are a part of, there are three main programs. The CERT programs, these are our volunteers, our community emergency response volunteers. They do basic trainings with FDNY and NYPD so that they are ready and they're prepared to do preparedness events on the field and response as well. And the second program we have in the community engagement team is Ready New York. Ready New York is the individual preparedness through the program, which is basically households. So you can learn about different hazards you may face in New York City and prepare you for all these types of hazards. So again, make a plan, gathering your supplies, and being informed. And this is specifically for household. And we also focus on different groups, right? Older adults, kids, deaf and people with disabilities, access and functional needs, immigrants, as well as people with limited language proficiency. And it provides steps of being prepared for different kinds of emergencies. And within it, we provide the My Emergency Plan that they can fill out based on their needs and based on what their plans are with their family members. And that takes us to community preparedness, which Mariah and I are a part of. So our community preparedness team, we reach out to faith-based organizations, coalitions, congregations, so that they can create an emergency plan for their community. We also do seasonal webinars, meaning if winter is coming, we have a winter storm presentation coming up. We had a hurricane, a crystal storm presentation earlier, as well as extreme heat and just different weather emergencies that can happen in different seasons, right? Specialty trainings for community and faith-based organizations. We'll talk more about that based on what trainings our partners need. They can communicate that to us, and we'll be able to make this possible. And we have within the community preparedness team, we have our community emergency planning toolkit. So this is what a community or a network can use to create an emergency plan for the community they serve. So these are the 3 programs we have within the Community Engagement Bureau. And I will pass it to Mariah so that she can talk about who we serve.
Thank you, Sanasa. So when we think about who we serve, so Sanasa has laid the foundation just to give you that 101 of who we are as an agency, who we are as a team. Again, our population, we serve community and faith-based leaders. And we do that through the hyperlocal organizations who are community-based, the community-based local the hyperlocal faith-based organizations or smaller congregation. And then we work with community and faith-based networks and or coalitions. We use that word interchangeably. So networks could be a cluster of 10, 5, 25 member organizations who are working for a common good to fill a need within the community. And so in the images on the bottom left corner, you see a couple of individuals with blue vest on. They're part of Lower East Side Ready, who is a community emergency network, and they're next to 2 CERT volunteers. And so they were unpacking some of the PPE back in the first wave of COVID-19 in 2020. In the middle, you see a round table of a couple of different individuals with name tags on. There's a woman in front sitting in a wheelchair. This picture was taken during our annual symposium, and they were doing a mapping exercise together as leaders. And then on the far right corner, you see an image. You just see a lot of different heads in a big space. And that was one of our convenings with the South Bronx Emergency Network. And so for us, we go for the hyperlocal because we know that often the hyperlocal are the local leaders who are creating amazing impact, but also who may not always have the capacity to organize themselves in very structured ways, especially as it pertains to emergency preparedness. And so when we think about what the basis of our programming is, we really establish the foundation. We are good followers of one of the scholars, Dr. Daniel Aldrich. And so there's this powerful quote and some terms that he utilizes that we've been making sure that we implement and integrate within our programming. And so the quote is, the collective ability of a neighborhood or a geographically defined area to deal with stressors and resume life through cooperation following shocks. That is a definition of community resiliency. I know that we've heard of so many different definitions of resiliency and community resiliency. And, some of us are born into having to be resilient people. Many of us are, many New Yorkers are naturally resilient based on life circumstances. But in this situation, when we think about emergencies, this could be a natural disaster or man-made. We want every community in New York City to be able to bounce back and get back to that new norm as a collective unit. And so what we found from the research of Dr. Daniel Aldrich is that there's 3 different components of social capital. There's the bonding. So it might be that, I'm hanging out with other people who look like me. You might think we're all cousins and we're just friends. And so I'm very comfortable with other people who are like-minded like me and who look like me. Then there's that bridging where I might start integrating with a couple of other different groups who may not look like me. So I might be part of a Bible study, and now I'm integrating with the local mosque, and I'm integrating with a couple of other different groups, and we have this interfaith group, and we're getting to know each other beyond just what's comfortable to us. And then there's that linking. The linking piece is what we want to be the bread and butter of this whole program. The linking piece is that we as community faith-based leaders are coming together with city government and we're linking. Part of Dr. Daniel Aldrich's research and a lot of his best practices is that he identified the communities that bounce back. If you look at any natural disaster that has happened in the past 10 years, that has impacted specific communities beyond New York City, and you look at which communities have bounced back a little bit faster, more than likely they are linked to government on all levels. They are linked on the local level, the state level, the federal level. They're even linked with those elected officials. And so while we can't do all that work in motion, the starting point is you establishing a strong relationship with us. So part of the foundation that we have as we incorporate and integrate the studies of Dr. Daniel Aldrich, we know what it means for community resilience on our part. We responded to an after action report. And so after Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy hit in 2012, it was kind of a realization like, oh my goodness, there is a disconnect. City government is disconnected from community and faith-based organizations. And so that was a call to action when the public advocate at the time, former Mayor de Blasio, pushed out this report. It really got different agencies mobilized of like, well, what are we going to do to close this gap? So New York City Emergency Management said, you know what, let's work with a couple of other agencies and community partners, and let's establish a toolkit. Let's establish a toolkit to help coalitions and networks work together to establish a community emergency plan so that they have a way to respond within their community when the next emergency happens. And so we say when because we know that at any point the next emergency will happen, and it's not to really create the fear, it's more to create that proactive response versus reactive response. And so a lot of that work happened between 2013, 2014. The first edition was produced in 2015, and then we pushed out the second edition in 2019. I just like to have the hands-on. So for you might be able to see it because it's a little bit blurry, but what we have is our community emergency planning toolkit. We don't like to push this out as a go forth and do it, check, check, check. However, what we've done is we've taken it from a place of doing some amazing boot camps of getting people excited about the work to really guiding networks through a step-by-step process to get them to understand the work and to get them to work collectively with their coalition throughout the journey. So I know that there's hundreds of different toolkits. The difference between our use of the toolkit in strengthening communities is that strengthening communities is about a journey with New York City Emergency Management. It's not about a checklist, it's about a journey through the process. Within this toolkit and within a lot of the work, we often speak about the emergency cycle. We think that this is a great premise for you to kind of start. If you're like, how are you going to build stronger communities? How are we going to get strengthened? How are we going to be more resilient? There's a cycle, and a cycle can start at any point, but then it gets back to the next point. And so often our focal point is always that preparedness piece, how to respond to the emergency. We're not trying to create new emergency managers. We are not trying to create new EMT people or new FDNY or NYPD, because our goal is not for you to be the first responders. Our goal is for you to be within eyes and ears where you're able to get the correct, accurate information to your community in response to something that might have been happening within your community. For that response piece, you know, that may be, hey, the water is out in this community. What can we do? Let's let the people know that there's water available on parking lot 10D, and they can come between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. That is a form of response that community partners can do in partnership with city government. There's the recovery piece. The recovery piece is more of the bounce back after the emergency. So before we used to always say we're returning back to normal, but it's also recognizing that it's a new norm. So there will never be a return to the norm that we had previous. So many of you have been responders and recoverers of COVID-19 in so many different ways, but we'll never be the same that we were before March 2020, right? And so the bounce back, that recovery piece is, if you think of the inflatable dolls that you blow and if you hit it, it kind of hits the floor and then it bounces back. That's what we want our networks to do. We want them, when that emergency happens, they get hit, they're not going to bounce back that fast, but that they're slowly able to get back because they have different tools in place. And then there's the mitigation piece. So there's things that are not just infrastructural, but they're actually like hands-on projects that you as community could take part in to help mitigate the different drainage that may happen to prevent street flooding. And so we always use this cycle of preparedness because it's always like, well, what can we do next? But it's also important to know, where are we in this emergency cycle right now? And so in this program, you're in the preparedness piece, and then sometimes you'll be in that response piece. So we talked about the toolkit. As it established, is before an emergency. So in that, we broke it down to like, what are communication strategies? What does it mean to have a resource guide? If you have a resource guide, should we go ahead and map out the resources? What does that look and feel like? Okay, well, after emergency, like, what role do we have? Oh, wow, there's an abundance of donations coming after this major fire that impacted 35 households. What are we going to do with all these donations? How are we going to manage donations? How are we going to manage volunteers that we don't know and that we've never seen before that are coming into our community? And so we put all these different components into the toolkit because we realize these are the reoccurring events and elements that occur whenever emergencies happen. And so we want to go from a place of just filling out this toolkit to establishing a very interactive living document that serves as your community emergency plan. And so when it says put your plan to action, that is the space where we're able to do some simulations and our tabletop discussions of, okay, we have a coastal storm that's hitting in approximately 36 hours. What actions is your network taking to do the following? And there's a checklist like so. And so that's the basis of the toolkit, which transitions us to how we've used the toolkit and how now we are using it for strengthening communities.
Thank you, Mariah. So Mariah spoke about our community preparedness toolkit, and in the toolkit, there are different things that are highlighted and how to use the toolkit. So all of the trainings are not listed, but here are a few of the key trainings we have in the toolkit. So special community preparedness trainings. So this can be DAFN. DAFN stands for people with disabilities, access and functional needs for different type of organizations. How do you plan for multiple emergencies, right? Let's say maybe it's winter and there's another emergency at hand. How does your network deal with these different type of emergencies at the same time? And we have our community emergency planning modules in the toolkit. It tells you how can networks map their community. Where does their community stop? What people do they serve? The resource guide. Where are your resource guide located, so that in case if your community members want to go looking for these resources, they have them available to them because you have already identified where these resources are located. Needs assessments. What does your community need? I talked about people with disability and access and functional need. They have mobility issues. In case of emergency, they need to evacuate to go to an evacuation center. How do they get there? Did they reach out to you? How do they know they have to? Who do they call to for these services? People with limited language. Do you provide translations to these people? And so on. Emergency communication plan. Do you have a communication strategy with your community members? How do you inform them that there is an emergency, there is a hurricane coming, or cooling centers are open in case of extreme heat? And managing donations. During an emergencies, you might receive more donations than you need. How do you manage that? How do you communicate that you only need, let's say, 50 diapers, but you receive 100 diapers? How do you take care of the rest? Again, volunteers as well. During emergencies, you might need 5 volunteers, but you end up having 10 volunteers. How do you deal with the other 5? Just thinking about these different situations and how to organize all of this and the toolkit tells you exactly how to prepare for this. And the Strengthening Communities program, one of the basic steps is to know how to deal with these different situations. And we talked about the community emergency planning modules, which is 5, and you get unrestricted money for you and your network, and you can use this fund however you see fit for your network, and complete functional community emergency plan, just like we do if you have preparedness events, trainings with your community members, so that they are more prepared for different type of emergencies. And then that takes us to different things that community network can learn when they apply for our Strengthening Communities program, right? We have preparedness capacity building. This teaches you different skill set that you can transfer to your community members. And we have coaching and technical assistance. We do one-on-one during the program, we do one-on-one trainings with our networks, so that if they have different suggestions, they have questions, any concerns they might have, so we communicate that between us so that we know where do they stand exactly. Community and team development, again, this always talks about, I think we're going to talk about two-way communication in a bit. So again, we communicate with you, you communicate with us, so that we all know where we all stand. And if any need is, if you need anything from us, we'll be able to provide that. And if we need anything from you, you also be able to provide those kind of information. And so, as I mentioned before, we have different trainings, webinars happening throughout the year, different training series. This can be, again, National Preparedness Month series that happens every year on September. So September is National Preparedness Month. We have a lot of different trainings, a lot of in-person workshops. For example, how can communities be language ready? That's one of the trainings we did during National Preparedness Month. Again, we put these in our newsletter, and we strongly encourage you to be part of these different trainings. And we have seasonal webinars as winter storms, extreme heat, coastal storms, and these different kind of emergencies, trainings by request, right? If we find out that one of our networks is asking for this specific training, let's say first aid, we can be able to provide this. We actually had an active shooter training a few days ago, which was very informative. So trainings that were requested by our networks, so they can let us know what trainings they want to take, and we'll be able to provide those trainings. And annual preparedness, the symposium. So we have a symposium coming up next year, which is March 7th. Keep this date on your radar. And we also post this in our weekly newsletter. And we are currently looking for presenters. If if you're a good presenter and this is something you're interested in, please let us know. And there is a call for presenters that went out. You can be able to send in your proposals, and we'll go over it later on, so that we can pick how many people are going to present in the symposium. So this is something to keep in your radar as well. And Mariah is going to talk about our program strategy.
So up to this point, what you've heard is what we provide for the general public, the tools that we utilize for the Strengthening Communities. The goals for Strengthening Communities program itself is for you all to deepen community preparedness within your community, for us to do that throughout New York City. And so that's establishing a preparedness of culture, a culture of preparedness, excuse me. And that means that you may be hosting different events. That means it's raising up awareness. That means that you have an active plan that you're sharing with other members. The other goal is that you complete a comprehensive framework for emergency planning and response. And so at the completion of the first year of this programming, you will have a community emergency plan. There are very specific steps that we take, and there's no way for you to jump ahead. And there's no way for you to fall behind either. We meet you where you are. So some of you may have a little bit of emergency management experience or a little bit of knowledge of what it means to prepare for emergencies. But if you're coming in and you're like, we work with young people, that's all we do. that's perfectly fine. We're not looking for emergency managers. We're not looking for folks to be first responders. We're looking for coalitions who have a powerful existence in the community and doing great work. So we do this within our community emergency preparedness modules. We also have a couple of different special trainings and program meetings that we will require throughout the journey. We will have an orientation in January with the selected networks to go over all the expectations for January into June. And you're able to map out, okay, these are our 2 primary points of contact from our network. These are the folks that you can always make sure that you email whenever there's a deliverable due or for any of the correspondence. And then what happens is we provide the coaching session. So that's what makes the program special is after the training, within a couple of days, we book a coaching session with you and whoever else in your network who's helping you work out that deliverable. The intent is never for one person to do all of the work. We've seen that when that happens, you start over analyzing, you start putting limitations on yourself. And also you just like, you can't carry but so many things. And if you don't know how to juggle and you're carrying so many things, something's going to fall. And so we really, part of you having a coalition of multiple organizations is to really plug in the other key folks from those organizations. When we do our program meetings, we want to hold space for you all to start cross-sharing, but we want to be able to, down the road, 5, 6, 7 years, if we're plugged out of the situation of hosting monthly meetings and trainings, that you're naturally still meeting with your colleagues from your cohort 3, and you're still sharing best practices. And so we want this to be sustainable in that sense. At the end of the program, you will do what we call an exercise plan, where you get to kind of exercise your emergency plan based on a simulation of possibly a heat emergency. It might be a blackout emergency, and you kind of get to see, oh, wow, like we're really great in this area, but we need to figure out this piece right here. The plan needs to be built out there. You can expect to have at least 3 to 4 touch points a month mandatory with us. All of our programming will be virtually. However, if you want to bring us out to your community for those coaching sessions, we are available and willing to come out. But for all the trainings all the mandatory sessions that we have, we will always host it on Zoom. So you might say, where are these modules? Get to it. Here are the 5 modules that we do. The first module is a needs assessment. We take you through that process of what is a needs assessment, why does it matter, how will it best show up for you and your community. You do that in the first month. We do a training, you get the knowledge, do a coaching session, you produce the deliverable, you get paid. The second part of the module is the community map and resource directory. So we mentioned the resource directory as part of the toolkit. The piece that we know that matters is that community map piece. And so all of our partners have created community maps. We have 16 folks who have participated in this program so far, 16 networks, and we have 16 different My Maps via Google that they've created. I have folks who from the age of 23 to the age of 86 who have learned how to navigate in using these tools. Communication strategies. So what are the written scripts that we can establish? What does that look and feel like for a blackout, for a violent incident, for a storm that's coming, and you all establishing the scripts? It may be that you say, hey, we got 3 other languages. Do you have someone who could provide the translations for that? Or where could you go for that? The 4th module is the donations and volunteer strategy. You would get the training on that. You would get the criteria of what it means to complete that deliverable. You'll get the coaching, you submit, you get compensated. And then we put all 4 of these together. And then it's a super, super duper deliverable is the emergency response. And that is the community emergency plan. And so for that framework, you're merging all the 4 pieces that you've already established. You're putting the pieces together, and then you're adding a couple of fillers to close in and kind of seal in that gap. And so you see, it says ×2 after each deliverable. And part of that is we strongly encourage networks to give a portion of what you're being compensated with to the individual or individuals who are helping you with their work. Sometimes a lot of the hyperlocal groups are made up of full volunteers, or it might be 3 volunteers that are doing all the work, and then they might be another paid staff member. It may be that you're able to give them a stipend. We will not dictate how you do that, but we strongly encourage and urge you, whoever is your point of contact, that you do offer them compensation. It also might just be built into that person's staff role. And so we are not going to intrude. That's why the ×2 is there, is because the vision was additionally for you to give and compensate that consultant. And when I use the word consultant, that community organizer who's already a part of your network. So in the application, you would note that we say up to $40,000. And so for each deliverable, there's a different amount that will be compensated. Each one has a different value. And so you will get that piece, but I said it before, you do the training, you get the technical assistance from us, at least 1 session, you complete the deliverable within your network, you complete it, you submit it, we provide feedback, we give reviews, and we say, okay, thumbs up, or we might say, we need you to go back and we need you to work on this area right here. So for us, our desire is not for you just to have like we did it, give us the money. The desire is really that you have a functioning tool that's going to allow you and your network to respond and have greater impact within the community. So you might also be wondering, okay, I do 1 year, then what happens? After you do your first year, you become part of the sustainment programming elements. So we have cohort 1 and 2 who all have done year 1 program, those 5 modules that we just went over. You do those 5 modules, the next fiscal year, you're automatically enrolled and you get to opt out if you can't do it to be part of the sustainment funding program. And so that you can earn up to $10,000. And so the intent, we know $10,000 may not be the most, but it's something. And our intent is for you to continue to socialize your emergency plan, update the living document, and establish a culture of preparedness. We'll provide a couple of trainings, but by the time you get to the sustainment funding portion of the program Lifeline, the pressure is lightened significantly. You won't have as many touch points with us monthly. So you go from having 3 to 4 to 5 touch points with us monthly for your first year to now, wait a minute, we didn't hear from Mariah, Sanasa, Emily, or Jill. Is everything okay? Everything's perfectly fine. We're only touch pointing now with you once a month because we know that you have your priorities and that you're working towards the sustainment deliverables that we've given you. And so we have that piece. We're building out an exciting piece for the extreme weather community canvassing. And so that will allow us to, whenever there's some type of extreme weather coming, it could be a storm, it could be extreme heat, and we say, wow, we need assistance with canvassing these areas. You're located there. Would you like to opt in? This allows us to compensate you as a network and coalition to do that canvassing work for your community and within your community with our guidance. And so we are building it to be more than just you have a plan, that's it. It's that you continue to do that culture of preparedness, is that you have the possibilities of doing these canvassing operations, weather related and or other. So the other activation could be that it's not weather related, but there was a major explosion that occurred on a block within your community and it's impacting, as a ripple effect, it's impacting multiple communities around, and 3 of the networks are located there. For our program, after you do your first year of programming, we're always, when it comes to the canvassing piece, we're always going to say, are you able to opt in or are you able to opt out? And part of that is us truly trying to honor that we know that you have competing priorities. We know that you're stretched thin, so you have small and mighty teams. And so we never want to put you in a pickle of feeling obligated to say yes to us simply because we're city government. We really believe in the power of relationship, and that is one of the gifts that we get to have by working with you. Oh, if we can go back. You might also be wondering, what is the source of funding? So we started our first year. We did get some federal funding that was in response to COVID. Because the program was so cherished by leaders beyond emergency management, we have locked in our city tax levy funding, which means that city council or the executives of the city hall level say you are approved to do this programming and we're giving you X amount of money to continue to do the program. So what that means to you, because you're like, What does this mean? That means that we have the support of not just emergency management, but we also have the support of our leaders in City Hall and several other different city agencies. And I spoke on it, you know, we get a relationship because we have a relationship. It's just like there's two-way involvement, two-way communication. So one example recently, there was some arsenic scare in Lower East Side Village. We had a network who was on the ground who immediately jumped in upon a soft request from City Hall. I found out they were on the ground. I reached out, hey, I hear you're on the ground, you're helping, you know, canvassing out these flyers, helping with water distribution. What else are you seeing? What else are you hearing? Getting that information directly from the partner, sharing it back up to my executives, sharing it back down and all around. That is the goal. We have something called the Emergency Operations Center, which is a large physical facility that allows over 150 different entities from state, federal, and local to get together to crosstalk. So instead of me saying, oh man, I need to connect with Sanasa, she's part of the mayor's office of community affairs, I hope she picks up the phone. Instead, Sanasa's right there in the EOC. We have a virtual version of this as well, where we're able to digitally do these components. It's not that you're physically going to be in the EOC or digitally going to be in the EOC, it's that you're tethered to us as community engagement within New York City Emergency Management, and that you are communicating up, down, and all around with us in how the emergency is impacting your community. You might be saying, hey, there's actually 3 languages that are spoke primarily in this building of 500, and here's what they are. It's Spanish, it's French, and it's Wolof. Great, thanks. Like that saves us 3 hours of assessment, right? So there's different things that you get to show up. We know that you're always going to be an advocate for your community's needs first, and we honor and respect that. We do the most within our role to elevate that back up and remind, because oftentimes our leaders are saying, what's the community saying? Here's exactly what the community is saying. So this is the part that we get to do after you establish that community emergency plan. We get to integrate you and start collaborating with you as it pertains to just the responses that are happening for the various types of emergencies that happen every year, every month, every week.
All right. Thank you, Mariah. So we currently have 16 networks, and in our cohort 1, we have Academy of Medical and Public Health Services, which is located in Brooklyn. We have Entertainers for Education, A4EA in Brooklyn as well. We have Farakaway Arvin Nonprofit Coalition, which is in Queens, the Haitian American Alliance located in Brooklyn, Mothers on the Move in the Bronx, Project Hospitality in Staten Island, Stop Bronx Emergency Networks in the Bronx, Harlem Emergency Network as well in Manhattan. And in our cohort 2, we have Neighborhood Housing Services of Queens, NHS Queens, also called Fifth Avenue Community in Brooklyn, Staten Island COAD, of course, in Staten Island, COAD stands for Community Organization Active in Disasters. We have Rema for Us, located in Queens, LES Ready, Lower East Side Ready in Manhattan, the Jewish Community Council of Greater Coney Island, which is also called the Southern Brooklyn COAD in Brooklyn, and the Point CDC in the Bronx. So these are 2 cohorts, and we are currently in the application for our 3rd cohort. And so what we're currently looking for in a network and we want them to be already there. We want they're already existing members with different, maybe not even 5 to more networks interconnected together. And so they have already established a presence in the community for at least 2 years and meet at least quarterly as a network. And also the network or the coalition has multiple different member organizations and established communication that has already been established between its members organizations that are a part of it. Also, the network or coalition has connections within the community it serves, because the main point of this is for you to know what community you serve and what different resources you can provide to this community. And also the network or coalition demonstrates that commitment to establishing an all hazards community emergency plan for their community so that they're more prepared for emergencies. And finally, they're able to identify two community organizers or community workers who are committed to leading and administering the deliverables. But again, this is up to the network to choose whoever they want to choose to work through these deliverables with us. And some of the bright spots and best practices that were shared by our networks were they serve as non-executive points of contacts, readily providing community-specific updates during emergencies, right? So in our emergency operations centers, if there's an emergency happening and we get news, we send out a newsletter to our networks, and them in return share those information to the community members. So our networks use their unrestricted funds to rent weekly truck to distribute food during an emergency. They were able, if they wanted to, hire youth ambassadors to develop and maintain their community map and resource guide, which Mariah talked about earlier, as well as purchasing resources to host preparedness events, just like we do webinars, trainings, that our networks are also able to do these different type of events on their own. And if they want us to be present during these events, we'll make it possible. At least one of us will go and support them. And purchase digital tools to keep networks organized, something we talked about that is in the module, as well as communication strategy. If there are different strategies that you would like to improve and it requires new technology or something you might need, they can use these phones to improve their digital tools or technology as well. And last but not least, network, they collaborate with local community board members, which are in the neighborhood, in the community, the local elected officials, to integrate emergency preparedness culture, like to continuously train, to continuously provide a place for the community to go to in case of an emergency, and so that they know if we were to know that there's going to be a hurricane coming, they will know the first thing to do. They won't be confused. They won't reach out to you, and everybody will know where to go for different resources. So these are some of the best practices and bright spots that we wanted to share with you guys, so that you know what the Strengthening Community program does. And I think that's the end of our presentation, and we'll move on to take questions. And I don't know if Mariah, you wanted to add something else before we.
Yes, thank you so much, Sanasa. So before we open up for questions, just reminding you all, the application is currently open. It goes until Friday, December 2nd. We plan to make notifications sometime late December, definitely before the beginning of the year. And again, the program cycle for this cohort 3 will start from January, and it will run to June 30th for the first cycle of programming. We're looking for up to 20 networks, so there's a lot of possibilities. I know there's CERT members on here, and so you might say, well, where do we fit in? You're very well connected. You may be part of a network or coalition, and or you may know of a network and coalition. So from there, we're going to stop, and just any questions you may have or curiosities. Yes, Araceli, Leah, yes. 1 second, you're muted. 1 second.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was here at an appointment with my mom at the doctor. So what I got the gist of everything, and I do want to listen to the presentation over again. So do you have to be a part of a non-for-profit or C501? Do you have to be a part of that? And I know you said, okay, and I'll put in for the application, but I would just want to know, do you have to be a part of a non-for-profit?
You do not need to be a 501c3 to apply. Is that the question?
Yes, it is.
Okay, you do not need to be a 501c3 to apply to participate. What will happen is you will need to get a fiscal sponsor to be the recipient of the funding, and you work out the agreement with them. But if you are so hyper local that you don't have that 501c3 tax documentation, that's totally okay. What we're looking for is that you're a coalition made of multiple organizations. We said at least 5 organizations. It may be that you're made of 4 amazing organizations, member organizations, to make up that coalition, and that's fine as well. So you don't have to be a 501c3.
So just one other question. So therefore, say for, as you said, 4 to 5 other organizations, right? So those 5 or 4 other organizations can be like maybe block associations or faith-based organizations or something in that connection that you would all be connected to, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So we had REMA for Us, and they are a merchants association. So all of their member organizations are merchants, as well as they were linked to a couple of other community-based organizations that were on the ground. And so likewise, you know, we definitely need faith-based. So you could be made up of a couple of different congregations or houses of worship. And then you might also have a youth organization that's a part of, you know, working against anti-violence. So it doesn't even have to be that your mission is specific to emergency preparedness. It's that we're tapping you on the shoulder. You're already doing great work in your community. What does it look and feel like for you to get organized around emergency preparedness?
Okay, so I'm sorry, just one more question. I don't want to ask all the questions, but I do
Okay.
have one more.
Okay.
So for instance, I'm the president of the South Ozone Park Civic, so 149th Street South Ozone Park Civic Association. And so we have, because we had this sewage situation 3 years ago, it's going 3 years ago, November 9th, 2019.
Yes, ma'am.
And, you know, we're still feeling the effects of that. And many in the community, like we had a situation that happened with Con Ed where the lights went out in a certain area 2 weeks ago. We now have another situation over here where some more sewage pipes had collapsed. So a lot of this things going on, my community gets nervous and they call me up about this and what's going on. So I think this would be something that would definitely be able to serve my community.
Yes, thank you so much. I see Miss Catherine, your hand has been up for a while too.
Sorry, I was trying to save the chat, so I had some information. I appreciate you calling on me. I wanted to follow up. There's another question in the chat that says, do you have a one pager? So I echo that. Can we get a one pager? And also, I saw something about digital tools for that could be used as part of the grant money. Do the digital tools have to exclusively be used by the organization for NISM, for lack of a better word, propaganda or information or outreach? I see you shaking your head. I feel like that's already the answer I'm looking for. I appreciate you. I'm gonna mute.
Yeah. So just to clarify, any of the monies that we give to you all, we're not going to tell you what to do with that money. It could be that you say to me, Mariah, we have this amazing event, and could you provide me with 2 interpreters that speak Portuguese? And so my comeback would be, hey, this will be a good time for you to use some of those monies. We don't have a budget to provide you with interpretation. So that will be the only time where I'll redirect you back to maybe use your money for this. Otherwise, we might ask you, and that's more so to catch any additional best practices. In terms of that one pager, we don't have a one pager. We do have a landing space on our website that gives all this information. We will make sure that it's updated with that timeline. We don't put how much money we're giving. We don't put that out there. That will be something that we give to you if and when you're accepted. But if you complete all 5 deliverables, your network will receive $40,000 by the end of June 30th, 2023. Okay, I see Priscilla, and then we'll go with Mr. Lonnie.
Hi, thank you for having me. This is very informative. So we are a nonprofit, but the thing is that we do have a lot of connections in various boroughs, right? So what type of trainers can we access in order for us to be able to present the 5 deliverables that you have presented on here? Also, do you have a recording so I can share with my director? Because
Yes.
we definitely, we don't just have it's diverse. So we have in the community, we service a lot of different communities. So Is that an issue as well too?
So easy answer, yes, we can provide you with a recording. Second answer, you're located in different sites throughout New York City. That's the question.
Right, right.
Our push, because we've been talking about this, we really want you to be focused on one specific community during this programming, because we know that each community is very different. And so the community mercy plan that you might create for the South Bronx may be different than the community mercy that you create for Parkchester Bronx, which may be
Right.
different than the community mercy plan that you create for East Harlem, because there's just different priorities, there's different resources. And so could you, use the plan that you create focused on one community and utilize it for another community? More than likely, yes, it's possible. There will be some things that need to be tweaked, but for us, we really want you to try to focus on one community and apply for that one community that you are going to be focused on for the duration of the program.
So how will we know if that community is already being serviced?
You
Because
don't have to worry about that.
that's not a problem.
No, ma'am, not a problem.
Thank you. And you said you do provide the trainings as well, right?
The trainings are
deliverables.
the five modules that we went over. That's the training that you'll get. You'll get a training for each one.
Awesome.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
what I'm looking forward to. Thank you. Because I
You're
thought I had to be prepared first and then apply.
No,
Okay.
there's nothing you need to do other than submit a high quality proofread application. That's all we want you to do.
Thank you.
That's all we want you to do.
Appreciate it. I thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Lonnie?
Thanks, Mariah, and thank Jill for reaching out again. As you know, we applied. This actually is another step, another level. We actually geared in this direction a number of years back. The state had actually reached out to us for something similar in the preparedness under Mario Cuomo and Andrew Cuomo, and that fell through. So we've been doing the mapping, something we probably need to tighten up on a bit. We've been actually addressing some of the issues and locations for emergency management or for emergency preparedness. So this is actually a good stepping stone into what exactly is being required. As you know, we have a big network of organizations and communities that we're already serving as members under the Eastern Queens Alliance. So we would definitely be willing to do this. And of course, I'm the point person, myself and Patrick. Of course, Barbara wasn't able to participate today. So I'm wondering if you could send this to me and I could put the video to me and I could forward it to her so she can get up to date as to what we're doing, being that we have to apply by January. So there's a lot of work we need to do to get on board with this, but we're definitely on board with what the requirements are and what Office of Emergency Management in the City of New York is willing to offer once we fulfill the deliverables in order to make an effort to help the community in an emergency, because, we're right outside the airports, we're considered in an area that's low tide, sometimes high tide in others, but, it's a blackouts, it's a whole host of things we really need to focus on in terms of a disaster plan in order to really be prepared to help the community rather than get hit and not have the resources available. So this is really helpful to us, something we will act on immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Lonnie. So we will send out that link for you all again to apply for the application. It's due on Friday, December 2nd. The programming will start in itself in January 2023. Some of you might have heard Mr. Lonnie mention that they have a map and a resource guide. There are others on the phone who have different components of a plan, if not a whole emergency plan. That does not disqualify you from participating. The positive challenge would be, taking what you do have to the next level and treating it as a living document. Because I do see East Harlem here, East Harlem COAD, and I know that they have an existing community mercy plan. Last cycle, we had LES Ready, who has a public emergency plan that is out, that they did about 5 or 6 years ago. And so they use this program as a time to really upgrade the information and make it very relevant to here and right now. So that's the other consideration. If you have components, don't feel like you are disqualified from participating. You are absolutely welcome to participate and apply.
Was this the same training that you gave yesterday? Is this training?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Same information session. I think maybe we have more questions today than we did last night. So we probably will use this recording.
We are awakened and alive.
Sarah, I see your hand up.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My quick question is about Cohort 1 and Cohort 2. Is there any criteria? But Korean Community Services covers Eastern Queens and partially West Queens, such as North Corona and East Almost. But if we are planning to apply for RFP, but where should we fall into, which categories? I don't know about the Cohort 1 and 2 criteria.
So I think the question you're asking me is, because you're serving in multiple communities, which one should you apply for? Is that the question?
Yeah.
It's your discretion, Miss Sarah. You know, we don't, I'm looking at someone else who is in Southeast Queens, but that doesn't stop you from applying, because even so, you have a different net of people that you're serving. And so it allows two networks, even if they're in the same geographic areas, they're reaching two different big populations. So this will really be the discretion of you and your network. I don't want to tell you apply for this one. I would encourage you to choose one. If you can't choose between one, you can submit the application for two and communicate to us. We are willing to do one of the two communities, and we can go from there.
Thank you for your answer.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, I see Miss Jennifer.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer with the Office of Senator Prasad. And I want to thank you on her behalf for that detailed and awesome presentation. We are very fortunate in our district to have Elber and Father Kane. They are always about in the district. And my question for you is, do you have like a specific request from elected officials? Do you need us to share that? I don't want you to be flooded with a million applications, but I would like to know specifically, how can our elected officials assist in this process?
Thank you for that question. We do have an InterGov team who has been amplifying the information out to various different elected officials. They do that within their InterGov newsletter that goes out once a month, and they've also sent a couple of one-off emails. I definitely will let our team know that you showed up in the space for us, and be sure that there's follow-up. If it's not from us, it definitely be from the InterGov team. We are encouraging any and every coalition in the 5 boroughs of New York City to apply. And I say that because we only were able to bring on 7 networks last time, and it wasn't because of a lack of applications. It was because of lack of quality applications. And so that's why I keep saying quality applications. Sometimes we get so into the work, our application is not rigorous like the federal level of application, but we do need some writing that explicitly outlines the great work that's being done. And so for us, we would love for you just to amplify this out to the different community and faith-based groups that you're a part of, that you're connected to, and let them know that this opportunity is here. And
I think there's a question in the chat.
yeah, Sam, can you just ask the question, because I'm
Yeah.
not reading the question very well.
Thank you. So I'm asking from Staten Island, and I'm seeing some pretty strong network networks there, which we interact with. So I'm curious, like I'll just be very specific, though I don't have this. Just if hypothetically, if the Staten Island COAD, which is something that we participate in, can we reference their network as our network, but we're giving them new depth in a particular community they're not reaching yet? So say we have one partner organization that we have quarterly meetings with, but we reference into COAD's quarterly meetings, right? So we are connected. Can we go for is it reasonable to get a new $40,000 with an existing cohort already getting funding like that?
Yes. Staten Island COAD can be listed as one of your member organizations for the coalition that you all are a part of. Jill has been sharing about the great work that you all are doing, and that the territory that you're covering is different than the primary focus of our two other existing coalitions that we have. So we have Project Hospitality and Staten Island COAD. So the answer is yes, you still can apply. Yes, you receive your own up to $40,000, and no, nothing of that $40,000 will have to go to Staten Island COAD. They are streamlined now into the sustainment funding portion of the program. So they're going to be doing their own set of things. Absolutely, we want you all to work together, but we also recognize that Staten Island is very unique. A lot of our communities are very unique, where you can be all on Staten Island, but there's still big gaps. And the same thing could be said for Queens. Even with Rockaway, as small as it is, there's still networks that only cover a certain vicinity of Rockaways, and there's still a big gap. So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. So we're going to stop right there unless there's any final questions. Thank you all for the great questions. It has been a pleasure to share this information with you. Once you get the recording, we absolutely encourage you to share this recording, share this application. You will have our emails listed. You can email us if it's like, hey, Mariah, are you all able to hop on the phone? We can hop on the phone to provide any type of clarification. If we see that there's a trend of a lot of people asking for follow-up, we may book a follow-up meeting to invite a couple of people at the same time. So we know that we're entering holidays. We know that time is short. We know that you're stretched thin, but we also know that there's a commitment that you have. And so we're grateful for that. Be in touch with us, even if you are being completely honest and say, we want to be involved, but December 2nd deadline is not going to work for us. Guess what? If I get that message from multiple groups, then I realize I'm going to talk to my executives and like, hey, we got to change something. We've been getting the same message from multiple groups. So throughout this whole journey from beginning to end, we really are trying to meet you where you are, and we're going to follow you throughout the process. If you are a group and you don't get selected, there still are ways that you could be part of that general programming that Sanas and I spoke about earlier today as well. So thank you so much for everything that you do in your communities. Thank you for considering our program, and please spread the word. I'm going to
Thank
stop the
you.
recording, but I got you, Mr. Lonnie.
Thank you.